Welcome to our exploration of the Greco-Persian Wars, part 1 of 5. Today we'll be looking at the Ionian Revolt in a nutshell, which will cover the cause, events, and significance of the Ionian Revolt, as well as the ramifications that center on the Greco-Persian Wars. So get ready for some informative fun, and be sure to pay close attention. There's some knowledge testing at the end. So, what's this all about? What exactly is the Ionian Revolt? Let's find out! The Ionian Revolt, beginning in 499 BCE, was a series of military uprisings from the people of Ionia, ancient Greek colonies that rebelled against the geographically enormous Persian Empire. If you've watched our previous videos, you'll recall that during the Archaic Age, a lot of Greek city-states sent out expeditions to colonize the Mediterranean. Well, the islands and coast around the Aegean was one of the many places where Greeks settled, and this region became known as Ionia. Herodotus, author of the Histories, gives us the only Greek historical text about the Persian Wars, written during the same time period. He implied that the cause of the revolt was mainly due to the overwhelming amount of anti-tyrannical feelings within the society, but we will delve deeper into the causes of the revolt later. The Ionians were mainly helped in their initial movement by the so far neutral Athenians and Eritreans, who really didn't have a beef with the Persians. Their involvement marked the first clash between the Greeks and the Persians and directly led to what was to become known as the Greco-Persian Wars. So, why did this come about? What exactly caused the Ionian Revolt? Well, let's take a look. The first thing to understand here is that the revolt was not common, ordinary Greek Ionian citizens deciding by themselves that they would overthrow the Persian Empire. It was actually former tyrants, we'll learn about them later, who had left their positions and who convinced the ordinary Ionian citizen to follow them in this revolt. The interesting thing to look at is why they chose to follow them. Herodotus implies that the Greeks were fed up with tyranny, but there may be more than one reason the Ionian Revolt came about. Scholars have suggested other potential causes for the start of the uprising. The first possibility is that, owing to the amount of tribute Ionians owed to the Persian king, many may have supported the revolt in hopes of relieving their debts. A second possibility is that the Ionian Revolt may have simply been the inevitable result of the Greeks finally colliding with the Persian Empire. And a third possibility is that the revolt was a physical response to the economic crisis in Asia at the end of the 6th century BCE, a crisis that was causing financial strains on citizens. So, how exactly did this thing get going? And who exactly got this thing going? Well, let's keep exploring. When aristocrats were exiled from the Cycladic island of Naxos, owing to a democratic revolt, they came to Miletus, where they had bonds with a man named Histiaeus, the tyrant of Miletus. They sought his help in order to regain control of Naxos. Now, Histiaeus was actually away in Susa when the Naxians came, but the regent of Miletus, Aristagoras, saw an opportunity for himself and helped them persuade Artaphernes, a Persian satrap, to support the Naxian cause. Aristagoras convinced Artaphernes that the success of the expedition would make a good Persian base in the Cyclades. What Aristagoras did not mention is that he believed the success of the expedition would also place him in a position of power at Naxos, and motivated by this opportunity for personal gain, he, along with exiled Naxians, successfully convinced Artaphernes the Persian to move forward with the expedition. After approval by the Persian king, Artaphernes named a Persian, Megabates, as commander of the fleet of 200 boats that set sail to Naxos. 200! Now that sounds like a big number. Unfortunately, on their way to Naxos, Megabates and Aristagoras got into a bit of a fight. Now, a friend of Aristagoras had left his ship unmanned for a little bit, and it happened to be when Megabates was making his rounds. Megabates was not happy. He ran a tight ship. He humiliated the captain by actually tying him up so his body was inside the ship but his head stuck outside of it. Aristagoras asked Megabates to let his friend down, but when Megabates refused, Aristagoras himself helped his friend down. completely disobeyed, Megabates was furious, and in the night he sent a message to the Naxians warning them of the upcoming attack by Aristagoras and his Persian friends, thus sabotaging his own expedition. With this helpful hint from Megabates, the Naxians were able to successfully prepare for the siege. It lasted for 4 months. After provisions ran out, Aristagoras and the rest of the troops were forced to leave. The Naxian expedition had been a disastrous and presumptuous undertaking, and pride was not the only thing that Aristagoras had to be worried about. Artaphernes still had to report the failure of this expedition to the king, and naturally, Aristagoras appeared to be the perfect scapegoat. So, in order to keep his head, he encouraged a full revolt against the Persians, leading the Ionian coast through the revolt himself. Here's a map of the Greek world during the Persian Wars. You can see the vast amount of orange that denotes the geographically domineering Persian Empire. And the parts of the Ionian coast that participated in the Ionian Revolt are denoted by the red stars. Okay, cool fact for y'all. Remember Histiaeus, the leader of Miletus, who was in Susa at the time Aristagoras had convinced the Persians to help him with Naxos? Well, upon hearing that the Persian expedition had failed, he feared his and Aristagoras' hold on their town of Miletus would be in jeopardy, and so he was anxious to give Aristagoras orders to revolt. But he needed a safe way to communicate this message. So he tattooed his message of rebellion on the head of one of his slaves, waited for his hair to grow back, then sent the slave to Aristagoras with instructions to shave his head and read it. So, along with Aristagoras, Histiaeus played an instrumental role in leading the Ionian Revolt. And to think that it all started with a slave's tattooed head. Now, let's get to the good stuff, the fighting. Knowing he might need help to battle this mighty Persian Empire, Aristagoras started to look for help from mainland Greece. He first went to Sparta and appealed to the Spartan king Cleomenes. When Aristagoras spoke to Cleomenes, he beseeched him to rescue the Ionians from Persian slavery. He then continued to offer Cleomenes more and more money until Cleomenes' daughter, who had been listening, finally warned her father against this corruption unless he left the room immediately. And so he left. Aristagoras then sought aid in Athens, where he was successful, though it was not only out of the kindness of their hearts. You see, the Persians were currently harboring an exiled Athenian tyrant, whom the Athenians did not ever want to see again, and they believed that a successful Ionian revolt would ensure that man's continued exile. And so Athens sent 20 ships, and the Erythraeans, who owed a former debt to Athens, also joined with 5 ships. And that's how the Greeks got themselves into this conflict with the Persians. They landed at Ephesus, in modern-day Turkey, and marched up to Sardis, a Persian city, and burned the city. It was historic, as it marked the first ever Greek offensive against the Persian Empire. The Persians did not wait long to counterattack. They congregated quickly, then followed the Greeks right back up to Ephesus, where their ships lay, and confronted them there. The Greeks were slaughtered, yet the revolt against the Persian king remained unaffected. However, once the Athenians were identified as one of the essential players of this attack on Sardis, the Persian king Darius not only swore vengeance, but even went to the extent of having a slave remind him 3 times a day of their assault in order to continuously reaffirm his motivation for future vengeance. This unrelenting promise of vengeance was crucial to the future of both the Greeks and the Persians, as it would later result in the Persians' continuous assault on Greece, beginning with the Battle of Marathon a year later, the first of the major Greco-Persian Wars. As passionate as the Ionian cities were about their plans to overthrow the Persian king Darius, the revolt would not continue for much longer. Persia began to retaliate, first gaining back control of Cyprus and putting Miletus under siege. There was one last final struggle, which was the naval battle at Lade, and one would assume it would be in favor of the Greeks with their far superior sea navigation, but the Ionians from Samos decided to accept terms and abandon the rest of the Ionian battalion at the very last minute, and once the Ionians from Lesbos saw the Samians flee, they followed suit. Vastly outnumbered, the Ionian Greeks were obliterated, and this was the beginning of the end of the Ionian Revolt. Miletus was soon captured, its men deported, and the women and children enslaved. Aristagoras fled to Thrace, from where he attempted to rule, but the city was eager to end the fighting and submit to the Persians, and so the people of Thrace murdered Aristagoras. The death of Aristagoras left the movement without a leader, and so the Persians finally came to quell the Ionian Revolt. So, essentially, the Ionian Revolt was a catalyst of the Persian Wars. As some scholars pointed out, there was going to be an inevitable collision between the Greek state and the Persian Empire, and the flame that lit the fire was the Ionian Revolt. It gave Darius a reason to attack the Greeks, which in turn, though, gave the Greeks a reason to unite. Remember, Greece had previously been a collection of city-states, or polis. Unfortunately for the Ionian cities, nothing great came of the revolt. For the Greeks, however, the Greco-Persian Wars would be an important part of Greek history. And as Morcott points out, the importance of the relationship between Greece and the Persian Empire at the height of the classical period cannot be overemphasized. The Ionian Revolt is critical as it marks the first physical altercation between the two civilizations. Some scholars even consider it the first great clash between East and West, but we can debate that later on. Well, we hope you've enjoyed the presentation. Here's a small assessment of what you've learned today. Right after the question, the answer will be revealed. Have fun and be sure to tune in to our next installment of the Greco-Persian Wars, the Battle of Marathon.